keep on running. I keep on running. I keep on running. Running. Non-stop till they out of breath. Putting in about 1,000 reps. Addicted to the grind like a pound of meth. Tonight I rock my line how I climb the best.
Welcome to the Football Autobiography Show. It is such a pleasure to be with you all today, wherever in the world you are listening. The Football Autobiography Show is dedicated to taking you on a football journey with football's most interesting players, coaches, trainers, staff, and journalists. Think of these as mini football autobiographies. Each guest will show you how they got where they are now, reveal their techniques for success, and what they've learned along the way. My guest this episode is Technical Director of Shanghai SIPG Football Club, Mads Davidsen. Before being the Technical Director at Shanghai SIPG, Davidsen was the team's reserve and U23 team coach and head of recruitment. Previously, he was an assistant under legendary coach Sven Goran Ericksson at Guangzhou R&amp Football Club. He has also coached the U19 team at Brondby IF, one of the biggest clubs in Denmark. And this past year, he co-authored the book When Talent Committed, which came out in May, but is only in Danish for now. In our interview, Davidsen talks about the importance of cultural intelligence, why he sends his youth players to train abroad, what he learned from working with Sven Goran Eriksson, and his keys to motivating players. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the show, Mads. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, pleasure to be joining.
Just so the audience has a little background on you, can you tell everyone where you grew up and a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, so I grew up in a suburb to outside Copenhagen in Denmark, and I was been fascinated by football since I could walk. Basically, we have some pictures of me back when I was 1-2 years old, already walking around with a ball. So it's always been a big part of my life, playing in the local club and moving on to some bigger clubs and trying to persuade my own career. But lack of talent and some quite bad injuries made my football career quite short. So I finished when I was 20 years old. And then basically I went straight into coaching because I got recommended by my mentor to start coaching. So that's been kind of my football way.
Why did he recommend you go into coaching, and were you thinking about anything else?
Yeah, so at that time I was also studying on university. I have a master in communication and journalism. So I tend to have focus on that part of the career at that time when I could see my career couldn't really continue. I was in the third tier in Denmark and I could not train hard because I got injured all the time. So I was basically, I thought that was it for football. But then my mentor, who I always listen a lot to and I always call still when I have some big questions, he called me and he said, as a player, you're one of the few who ask questions. You're one of the few who actually think about the game. So you must try to be a coach. You must deliver some of your ideas to young players. And then the same day, because I listen a lot to him, the same day actually I was already assistant coach for a U12 team in that Copenhagen club.
So you decide to go. He inspires you to go into your coaching career. How did you get ahead in the football coaching world when sometimes it can be a little bit difficult when you have more established names, ex-players with longer playing careers, or just it can be difficult to break into, I imagine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I started on the right level. I started in a club in Denmark called B93, which is a very good club when it comes to youth. Many elite players come from this youth academy, but on a senior level, it's not really a big club. Also now in the third tier in the Danish leagues. So I think my advantage was that it was quite a small club, and they liked that I came straight from from the pitch, and I could still do some skill training with the kids because I was still able to play on at least at the level. And then I was just doing assistant. I was not asking for any money. I was not asking for a contract. I just wanted to see how it was like while I was doing my degrees in the university. And then I kind of liked it. And then short after they asked me to be the head coach of this group. And then from there it basically only went one way. Then suddenly I found the same passion as I had when I played, and I started to feel the tremendous feeling when you do a difference for other people and you change their development through your own ideas. That's, I think, is the biggest thing of being a coach.
What I mean, you said you were working with 12-year-olds. So what was the greatest challenge working with 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds at the time, and how did that set you up to coach older players that were 19 later on?
Yeah, so I was really at this club. As I said before, this club was very famous for the youth academy. So there was actually a lot of good youth coaches in the club. And to be straight honest, I didn't know anything. I was purely guessing. I had a gut feeling on what to do with these kids, but I never tried to develop a curriculum. I never tried to develop players, so I had no clue, basically, if it was working or not. But I had some good people around me from the older teams, and who was the head of talent, who was like helping me and guiding me, inviting me to coaching seminars inside the club. And suddenly, slowly, I started to develop a mindset of a coach, and I started to get some knowledge. And then when you have knowledge, then you can start to be critical in terms of your own knowledge. So it came like step by step, and then I could see my ideas were working. The players were improving. The style of play was and we started to look like a good team, and the players took the next step, and some went to bigger clubs. And so I got some, you can say, practical empirical work, because I could see that the things I did basically were working. And then actually I had a job offer at that time, a few years later, from Qatar. They wanted me to be head of a group called U14 at Aspire Academy in Qatar. So basically I actually quit everything in Denmark and I went to Qatar, but for still unknown reasons. For some reason, there was problem with my visa. There were some political issues at that time in Denmark and the Muslim world. And I don't know if that interfered, but that's at least what I was told. So actually, for 6 months, I was in a big mess of moving back and forward from Qatar. And then suddenly I didn't get my money and I didn't get my contract. So I had to go back. And then I basically knocked the door in the same club, B93. And then they asked me to be part of the U19, where we became kind of two head coaches at the same time.
And so when you thought you were going Qatar, now that it's been a while since that opportunity, do you wish that you had gone to Qatar, or that would have helped you more, or was that kind of a blessing or a good thing that you didn't end up going there?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because obviously I was very disappointed when it didn't come through at that time, because it was not even close. We already signed the contract and everything, so it was more or less done. But looking back, I might not have been ready for it. I didn't have enough experience, and to be honest, the offer also came through some network, because they scanned the world of U13 coaches and thought I was the most experienced one. I think it came through some network. And then I did some trial trainings in Doha, and they liked what they saw. So obviously I wanted to go for it. But you have a good point. I've been thinking those thoughts since, that it might have been too early, that I might have basically destroyed my own career, because I didn't have I only at that time been a head coach for 1.5 years, I think, at U12, U13 level. So it was actually good to come back to Denmark and then learn from another coach who had more experience than me on the U19, and suddenly I got more and more involvement. Also because he had a private, he had a family, and I think he had a kid, so he was a bit away in periods where suddenly I was in charge. It's very, very different from working with U13. And then after that, I thought, okay, now I stay here for some years to develop. And then at the same winter, I had a call from Brondby, which is a big club in Denmark. At that time was maybe the best youth club in Denmark. And then obviously it was difficult to refuse to go there and be the assistant of the U19s.
So you go to Brondby, and which is a big opportunity for you. At that point, you've been coaching about 3 or 4 years. How are you a different coach now than you were when you first got hired at Brondby? How has your approach to developing players changed?
Yeah, I think it changes still. I mean, you get more knowledge and more experience along the way. If you keep being curious, I think that's a key element. You must be curious. I see some coaches who lose. They lose the fact of being curious along the way, and then they simply stop. They stop developing, and then also their players they work with will stop developing. And I've always been a curious person. That's also why I think my mentor initially asked me to be a coach, because I was curious. I was a coach. I would knock his door after every training and ask him some questions. Why did we do that? What's the point of that exercise? And can you help me with some videos for my game? And we have to remember this is back in early 2000. So in that way, it was not very normal for players to do video for themselves and stuff like that. But I'm always been curious. If I don't know anything, I want to know it. And obviously, this week, actually, I had a coaching seminar here in China for our youth coaches in the club where I work with now, Shanghai SIPG. And we actually just talked to the coaches in the seminar that my advantage now is that I've worked with players who now play on the highest level, which means that I have seen, felt, trained players who now play in La Liga, who play in the Premier League, who play in the Bundesliga. And that's just an extremely good empirical stack to have, because then you know what the demands are. You know, okay, if a player has that level when he's 16, 17, 18, 19, then he has a chance to play on the highest level. That's actually what I try to teach the Chinese coaches now, because they lack this part. They never develop a player for the highest level, so how can they know? How can they know what the demands are for football on the highest level?
Is there a particular method, though, to your training? Do you have like a system of which you go to train players?
I'm a man of structure, so I'm extremely structured, and that also in my private life, I don't like to do anything of coincidence. I don't like to not be prepared. I'm a little bit almost over-prepared sometimes, which also annoys people around me in my private life. But I don't think there's any like secrets or stuff like that. But I always say to my players that we must, the training must be like all of us are aiming for playing for Real Madrid or Barcelona. That's the mentality we must think when we are in the training, and also that's the quality we have to put in technically, tactically, physically, mentally. And then we have to create an environment that will be as high level as possible, maybe even higher than the players are able to play sometimes, to see where they can go. And we know, of course, especially now I'm in China, that many of us will not go to FC Barcelona, but we have to put the bar as high as possible. I'm not happy, for example, here in Shanghai if my current youth players, if we just develop 5-6 players to our first team, that's not enough. We want the bar higher. I must have players playing in Europe. I want players to go to the Premier League. I want players to go to the League. So I think at least also what the players I work with have told me, that my mentality is in that way quite strong, and I give everything. I'm a guy who works purely of passion. I don't care what I earn. I don't care basically where in the world I stay. I work purely for passion. So therefore I can give a club a lot of hours, and that obviously over time is nice, I think, for the players, that I'm always there if they need me.
Well, I mean, what you just said made me think of the expression, when you shoot for the stars, even if you fail, you can like hit the moon. I forget the exact expression, but when you shoot really high, even if you fail, you can end up at a really good place. So you're at Brondby, and then you get a call from Ebby Sands, an ex-player of yours, and he what does he tell you? Describe the conversation you have and what you were thinking while after the phone call.
Yeah, Ebbe, I met Ebbe in a coaching course 3 years earlier, and Ebbe there, I end up in the same group as Ebbe, and he's quite, I think, fascinated by my kind of experience, because in that course we have to work with under 14, under 15 players, and this, of course, is at that time is my main experience. And Ebbe is coming straight from a professional career. And we have a lot of good talks, and we help each other during this week of course. And then 3 years later he called me and he said, I still remember you from this coaching course, and I really liked what you did there. I like your work, I like your ideas, and actually I'm opening a football academy in China, and I want you to run it for me. So the conversation is quite short, and I say, give me 24 hours more or less to think about it. But inside, I already knew I wanted to go because I didn't make a big career myself as a player. And I always told myself I want to go when I get the chance as a coach. And I think you mentioned earlier not being a big name. I also have to be realistic. I'm aware that Barcelona or Manchester City are not going to call me yet, at least. So therefore, China was a possibility. It was a development country, football country, and this was an interesting idea to open the first football academy in Shanghai, a city with 24 million people. I still remember the reaction from the Danish environment. It was, of course, a bit surprising because I had a really good job under 19 head coach in Brondby and match performance analysis for the Super League team. And I was only 29 years old. So actually, that in kind of way, I was already developing a career that could be quite interesting in Denmark. But I had to take the chance. I like to come out of the comfort zone as a person. I get bored if I do the same things too often. I need to challenge myself all the time. Otherwise, I don't get the daily kick. I don't feel the flow. So this was a chance. And then, to be honest, I was also lucky when I came to China that things has developed as they have because of the president and the big plan of changing the football here. So timing was good, you can say.
So you get to China, and I want to read a quote that you gave in goal.com when you were talking about players that come to China. And then I want to hear your reaction. So the quote is, "If you don't adapt and don't adjust your own ideas, the way you communicate, the way you give feedback, then you have zero chance of succeeding. I've seen many players and coaches come there and try to force their way. I'm sorry to say they only lasted 6 months." So what has been your key to staying in China as long as you have been? It's been about 5 years. So what has been your secret where many people, I guess, fail?
Yeah, I think some of the things you said in that quote is I still believe in. What I call it cultural intelligence. That when you work in a different culture, you must develop a cultural intelligence. You cannot force them your way. You cannot force through your ideas. You must be strategic and choose your fights and choose your communication and choose your feedback, how it works, how it will get a maximum effort in that culture you work in. And I still believe that I've seen a lot of coaches come here and I think that they can work exactly as they do in Spain or exactly as they do in Holland. But it doesn't work here, and it's nothing to do with that the Chinese are not professional. It's just the fact that there's a very different culture here. I sometimes say when I do presentations for clubs or for companies that, in my contract with the Shanghai SIPG, it doesn't say that I'm here to change a 2,000-year-old culture. That quote is not in my contract. The contract says I'm here to help develop a better football club. And I think people coming from the Western world, they tend to misunderstand that they come in and say, oh, that's wrong, and that's wrong, and that's wrong. But that's the culture. And you can't change a 2,000-year-old culture. You can advise them, and you can slowly adapt the new generation's mind in what you think is the right way. But it's 100% sure that I don't like the word survive, but in this sentence you can use it, that you only survive here if you kind of follow the rules. That's my opinion.
And can you give me like an example of a time where you said you kind of had to like I won't say survive, but a moment where it was difficult for you wanted to possibly change one of their ideas, but you had to hold your tongue and kind of embrace their 2,000-year history, as you said.
Yeah, we can take a simple example from my old club, my former club where we worked with, where I was assistant coach for Sven, called Guangzhou R&amp, where we had discussions, and obviously we wanted to make a professional environment, so we tried to find the small percentages in all areas. And one area was obviously the food and the restitution part, and then we did some fat measurements on the players, and we could see that in general they had a little bit too high fat percent, nothing big, but a little bit. And therefore we hired an expert to find out what we could do to change this. And he came back after observing the players for a while, and he said, the big problem is that they eat too much white rice, so we need to take that away. And from a 100% perfect world, that might be true. But for people who live in China, they also know that food in China is kind of a religion for them. It's a very important part of their world. It's very, when you travel in China, you find out that each city or each province has very different food, and they're very proud of it. It's a big part of their culture. Maybe because they don't have kind of a normal religion, they're not very religious people. So food becomes kind of a religion for them. So just as a primitive example, if we went in that day back in Guangzhou and basically removed all the rice from our canteen, then I can almost guarantee you that we would have been sacked 4 months later, because we would have 33 players hating us. But of course, what we did was more strategic. That we slowly spoke to the players, that we basically cut down the amount of rice. We might have tried to change the rice to brown rice, which is a better have better fibers, and et cetera, et cetera. So the point is just that you cannot come in here and just change everything from day one. And I think that's sometimes the mistake being made. That doesn't mean you can't change it, or of course you have to try to make everything as professional as possible, but it takes time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, given the example you said. So you alluded to being at Guangzhou, and there you were with Sven Goran Ericksson. He's a famous coach, and as England coach, countless other big-time positions. What did you learn from him about football in general, or about coaching?
Yeah, that's difficult to put down in a few sentences, because I stayed with Sven for a long time. We were in Guangzhou for 1.5 years, and then we were 2 years here in Shanghai SIPG. So Sven is also a personal relation to me now, of course. But of course, when you meet people with experience from the top level, then there's always something to gain. That can be the way you speak to the players. Sven is very strong on the relationship with the players. He's actually, speaking of my previous example, very smart strategically in terms of picking his fights, not make people go his way instead of making trouble in between people in the club. And of course also how he sees the game. It's, even you're Swedish, and he's Swedish and I'm Danish, we're neighbors. There's only 20 minutes drive between Sweden and Denmark, but still there's a big football culture difference. So I learned a lot from the defensive side of the game, which is I don't think I'll make any trouble if I say that Swedish football has a bit more focus on defensive organization than Danish football. So I learned a lot there. It challenged my view on some things, and that's I think what you need to do as a young coach. You need to challenge yourself thinking and your view on the game, because otherwise you'll just keep doing the same thing. And football also changed a lot. So I had a really good time with Sven, and of course, like you said, learned a lot also network wise. Of course, Sven is a very gentleman. Invite me to his network and share his network with me, which of course is a big part for me, because I'm a no name, and I need a bigger network, which I really have managed to develop here the last years, thanks to Sven, for example.
I want to actually even go a little bit before that. From when you were getting the job at Guangzhou, I read that there were some problems with the contract and the process of that, and you said that it was kind of a hard time for you. Can you describe those difficult days when you were in that contract process and why it was so difficult?
Yeah, so actually, you cannot even say there was any problems. It was just culture clash again. That when you do it, you start to do a deal with the Chinese club. Sometimes in the culture, they won't tell you exactly that this actually can take a little while. They rather tell you that it's going to be done soon and done soon and done soon. And maybe I was a bit naive there. I actually thought it was going to be done soon. But the period was tough because I didn't know. Suddenly, I was doubting if the contract would ever come. I was waiting a few months in Shanghai, and I felt a little bit pressured because I didn't have any money. I spent all my money traveling around China to visit clubs to gain new network, and I didn't get a high salary in Denmark or at Davidsen Academy, and that was okay. It was my own point of going out and just grabbing the chance. But I was literally. I couldn't afford almost to go home for Christmas to see my family. So it was tough times also when you don't know when the income will come. So it was not easy because then you lose focus and suddenly I couldn't focus on my work. I was trouble sleeping and of course you feel a bit you start to feel a little bit insecure because also as I mentioned earlier I'm a man of structure. So suddenly the structure was kind of taken away from me.
Yeah.
So it was not easy, but eventually I'm also quite stubborn, luckily. So I stuck to it. Where you can say you could have given up after a few months. Say no, I have to go home now. It's not. I don't feel well and I don't have any money. But I kept going, and luckily in the end we managed to seal the deal.
Yeah, I mean everything worked out in the end. So eventually you made it. You came with Sven to Shanghai SIPG FC, and now you're the technical director. What part of the technical director job is something that you might not have expected when you took the job, or what part of the job do you think fans don't see?
Yeah, you can say technical director is, I think if you ask 4 technical directors about their job description, I think you'll get 4 different answers, because it's a role very depending on which club you're in, I think. And of course, we try to clear out the expectations before we sign the deal and all that, but it was a new role for me suddenly to be much more strategic than the last years where I've been more practical, being part of the coaching staff and suddenly being around the coaching staff instead of being advisor to the general manager instead of being his employee. So there are of course some changes in the role, but I think in general that it's a great challenge for me because now I've been an assistant coach or a head coach actually the last 11 years since I started coaching. So it's nice to suddenly have try this way of working in a football club to be more strategic and to try to be the guy who keeps the strategy, who try to maintain the club in the right direction, first team wise and youth wise. We developed a strategy called the SIPG way, how we want to play, how we want to win titles, how we want to develop players, etc., etc. And that's kind of my role to try to all the time develop this and also make sure that we don't only win tomorrow, we also win in 5 years.
So what is the SIPG way? Can you be a little bit more specific?
Yeah, it's our club philosophy. The advantage, if you can call it that, was that when I came to Shanghai SIPG, me and Sven, we were in Guangzhou R&amp. We had a good season in 2014. We finished 3rd with a very small club, a small budget. We kind of surprised the whole China. And then obviously Sven's name was attractive in China because we lifted the club from 13 to 3rd position. And then Sven had this offer from a new club in Shanghai. So basically SIPG bought the club. It was not their club before this. It was in the 2nd tier before, and it was called Shanghai East Asia. And basically what they did was they bought the rights to the players. So when we came to Shanghai SIPG in December 2014, I still remember the first meeting, which was very interesting because basically there was nothing. It was a new club, basically on all terms. And how often do you get the chance to basically create something from an empty paper in football? Football clubs are full of history, full of cultural, also disadvantages where you come in and you want to change something, but people in there don't want to change or the club don't want to change. But here, we could actually build everything from the ground. So being the assistant for Sven, I was also at the same time interested in the whole club setup and what they wanted to do with the academy. So I started on the side to do the SIPG way, which is now our club philosophy, how we see football, how we develop players, how we train, create curriculums for all the teams, create coaching education, basically create the environment that is needed to create a professional football club. So a lot of details, of course, but again, very, very interesting to be able to build something from the ground, more or less. That's a privilege.
So when you're the head of scouting, or you do a lot of scouting as technical director. So what do you look for in players? Are there any key indicators or characteristics?
Yeah, for our youth, we mostly look for game intelligence or football intelligence. So we have some criteria where we judge the players from 1 to 5 in some different colors. So over time, when you start to develop a sheet, then after some years, you will have a diverse between the players, and then it will be easier to see who is actually the right player for us. But we believe in that in the future, football intelligence will be more and more important. The ability to react fast and think fast, where you can say traditionally in China they have been looking more at physics. I can see that in some of our youth teams. They've been purely picked on physics, which is a classic thing in football, that you see the performance instead of seeing the potential. That a big player or a fast player, he can look good in an under 14 game or U13 game because he's basically just developed faster, matured faster than other kids. But the question is if he's the better player in 5-6 years, and therefore we go in and we try to now pick more game intelligent players because we think they will last longer.
But how do you identify that game intelligence? It must be difficult to measure that.
Yeah, of course, but of course there's no. It's easier to measure how fast you can run from 0 to 60 meters. But you can definitely put down some criteria about, for example, the position number 8 on the midfield, the position number 10, their ability to find a new space, their ability to penetrate passes between the opponents. There you can actually measure related to our style of play how much they do these kind of things. We also do that for our own players, try to actually measure if they understand our style of play. And measure if they over time understand it even more closely. Because if we want to penetrate a certain pass, then it's actually possible to measure if that pass is coming more frequently or not in a game. So it's possible, but of course not as easy as measuring a guy who's 190 and can clear the ball 200 meters, or a guy who can run 60 meters very fast. But that's where football needs to change, if you ask me.
So, I mean, it's all about football intelligence, developing their brain. It seems. So, there's an interesting idea that I saw that you have at your football club that I wanted to ask you about, which is I'm going to read a quote. We also have planned to develop a character building program where we want to send players abroad for 6 months or 1 year to develop their characters. First question is, what gave you the inspiration for this idea? And what do you expect to get out of this program? Their kids' characters improvement. Why is that really important?
I think the inspiration came because of my 5 years in China, where I've seen so many players now. I've known so many players. I've worked with so many players that I can see a pattern in a little bit introvert personality, a little bit of closed personality, often might because of the system, and I'm not talking about the football system, the society system here, how they are developed in school, how they are spoken to by the authorities. So therefore, we were thinking that sometimes the Chinese group lacked leaders because they were all a little bit too introvert. So therefore, we were discussing how to open their mind, and I've just seen some of the players we have signed who has been abroad. We have some Chinese youth players who's played, for example, 2 years in Portugal or 3 years in Spain, and then they came back, and they had a very different mindset. They are more open mindset. They are more ready to take responsibility because they have been seeing other things in not only in football but in life. So this idea I introduced to the management, and they really liked it. And actually right now we have our U17 team is in Brazil for 6 months on not only a character building program. It's also of course about football, that they can play some really good games there. They can get a different kind of skills training in Brazil. So it's already started, you can say, but it's something we want to develop even more.
Yeah, I thought that was just a brilliant idea and really a tremendous opportunity for the kids. I'm curious, by that same idea, how has living abroad improved your character?
Yeah, unbelievable. And I think actually it's the same thing. I'm not that introvert maybe, but I am actually as a person as well. At least I was. No, but it opens your eyes, and I think also I saw a quote one from a Danish athlete who wrote a book, and I still remember the quote he had a quote in the book which was fantastic, and I can only wish that I wrote that, because he's basically saying that everything we discuss in life depends on what you have seen and what you have experienced. So if you haven't experienced a lot, then your discussions cannot be very, very, very wide or very interesting. And actually, the next quote was just as interesting, because he said, when you travel or when you live abroad, you see different cultures, you see different lives, you see different societies. And actually, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. That's not the point. The point is not that now I think everything in China is great or I think everything in China is bad. No, the whole point is you have to see it. You have to live it. You have to try it, to understand it. And then it gives you a perspective which you can discuss from. And that's a life kind of quote also for me, but also for sure also can relate to my business now, football, that you must see something else to be able to understand where you came from or how. I mean, I have a different view now on many things because I stayed out in 5 years.
Yeah, I totally agree. I taught English in Korea for 2 years, and I definitely picked up some things because of that experience, that cultural experience. I mean, I share a lot more now with people because that's just part of their culture, and it definitely transfers a bit, or at least makes you think. You became a motivational speaker, giving speeches in 2015. Why did you become one, and what were some of the themes of the speeches that you gave?
Yeah, I don't know if I can call it motivational speaker, but that's maybe a big word. But I think that a lot of my the staff I work with and the players, I've always been very interested in how to manage them. Actually, just as much as understanding the game, it's been a big part of my curiosity to know how to lead others and understand others. Because I think too many, you can say coaches, but you can also say leaders. Today they tend to copy their own motivation into others. They think that how they are motivated must also be the same for others, and if that doesn't fit, then they want to change them. So in general, I think it was just part of my journey. Also, like we just discussed, that I saw a different culture here. I saw a different leadership. I saw a different way of coaching. And already when I worked in Brondby, I was curious on some players because they reacted very different to feedback in terms of other players. For example, the player I had there, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, who's now playing for Southampton, had a very different reaction on some part of the management I did with him. So I was curious, and I therefore I was lucky to know a researcher in motivation. So we started to do some field studies and try to engage some more knowledge on this, for me, very, very important topic.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you found from that research? I'm assuming this is the research you talk that's coming out in your book, when talent commits.
Yeah, so basically what we found out was a little bit what I said before. We found out that there was a mismatch often between the feedback culture, or you can say the leaders, the coaches' culture, understanding his players. He went only one way, you can say, and that means that he might motivate 70% of the squad, but there might be 30% that did not get motivated by his way of working, or his way of speaking, or his way of creating the environment. And what we saw was that that's a problem, because often some of the best players were not performing because they were not motivated. And if they don't perform, they also don't initially give the club the best results, and then in the end it will hurt the coach or the leader. So it's kind of a logic that you must make sure that you understand your players better. And I'm also talking here on a personal level. And there is a old-fashioned culture in football, because football is seen as a privileged life. It's seen as a life where people, or young people, can earn a lot of money. So the media, also the fans, they tend to think that he must be motivated because he has this privileged life. But that's a very simple thing to say, because I can speak for myself. I'm not motivated by money. I'm not motivated by fame. It's nice to have more money than I had before I was waiting on my contract in Guangzhou, but it doesn't give me the kick every day. It doesn't make me work hard every day. That's something else. I need something else in life. And there, football has a little bit of a primitive culture in terms of only thinking that if we pay people enough, then they will perform. That's simply not true.
And so you mentioned Pierre Højbjerg didn't respond to your motivation. How did you, after he wasn't really responding to it, how did you approach it differently? How did you react to that?
No, yeah, I was just curious. So I had as many talks with my friend who was a researcher for 10 years in motivation. Also, the person, the woman I wrote the book with, together with Hella Hedegaard Hein, she's called, from Denmark. And there she kind of she wrote a book also 5-6 years ago about this topic, where I could get some inspiration, because Pierre, for example, is a player who needs to be involved. You need to involve him in some discussion. That doesn't mean that he takes decisions, or that you suddenly are not the boss. That's not the point. The point is that if he feels involved, if he feels that he can have a bit of a saying, then trust me, he will perform 25% more for you. And these things, some coaches don't know. And also we saw some coaches in our field studies basically being afraid of this, because they are a little bit afraid of giving away slightly percentage of the power, because maybe inside they're a bit insecure. So what happens suddenly if the player starts to challenge your sessions or your ideas, then they feel insecure, and they just hammer the player down, instead to create this old-fashioned culture. And that of course can work in a short term, but trust me, there are many players like this around who is not motivated by this way of leading.
Yeah, it's not sustainable to have a healthy relationship like that. So you talk about motivation and what has motivated you. So where do you see yourself in 10 years? What goals do you have?
Yeah, so there we actually have one of the issues in the book, that many people are not motivated by goals, and I'm one of them. No offense, by the way. But that's also an old-fashioned, just to finish that one off, that's also an old-fashioned thinking that if you just make a goal, then everyone is happy. But trust me, again, there's a lot of people who get demotivated by have to doing these kind of goals. They simply work or play for something else. That's a big part of them, and they don't care if the goal is to win the league or not. They want to win, of course, but that's not why they wake up every morning. But anyway, I understand your question, and of course I also have, I call it directions, that I try to make some directions for myself. And 10 years is a very long time to look forward in football, where obviously coaches last 1 year and 7 months. I think the statistics are from UEFA.
Yeah.
But of course, I now I've been to China for over 5 years, and my contract lasts another 18 months to the end of 2018. So that is short-term wise what I look for. I'm definitely going to stay here these 1.5 years to just keep focusing on my job here and try to help the club forward. From there, yeah, it's difficult to say. I have obviously the idea of heading back to Europe is of course sometimes popping up in my mind. But for me, it's all about the project. I can live anywhere in the world. I claim to say that I can fulfill my ideas anywhere in the world, because now I'm very aware of this cultural issue, which is often what kills coaches when they go abroad. So for me, it's all about the project. It's the most interesting project in Denmark. Is it in Sweden? Is it in England? Is it in China? Is it in South Africa or Dubai? It doesn't really make the big difference for me. I have my passion through finding the most interesting project where I can do a difference.
Oh, that's very interesting. Very not super common, but that's what makes it that more fascinating. What is your proudest accomplishment?
Yeah, not really something I spend a lot of time thinking on, but I can give you kind of an example also from the way about also one of the points in our book. That many people tend to think that the biggest moment for athletes or coaches must be when they won something, when they won the gold or they won the champion or whatever. That's also works for a lot of athletes, of course. That's why they work hard. That's why they choose to be an athlete, because they want to win the Olympics, or they want to win the Champions League, or they want to win the World Cup. But we also found other athletes who play for something else. They play to make a difference. They play to make football a more beautiful game. For example, to give a few examples, so we have an Olympic swimmer from Denmark in the book who says that she wants to look like a dolphin in the water. That's her dream. It's all about the technique that motivates her. And then, of course, she's not dumb. She also knows that if she looks like a dolphin in the water, then she will win the World Olympic eventually. So it's for me, it's a little bit the same. But I can pick another question if I'm allowed, because sometimes people ask me what is the greatest performance or the result you had as coach, and I can answer that. It was a very cold January day in 2011, where I was coaching Brondby under 19, and we played a friendly game against the IFK Gothenburg at Brondby. They were visiting us, a Swedish team, and that day in this friendly, my team and my players came as close as possible to what I would call the perfect game in my style of play, in my way of thinking and seeing football. It was unbelievable, and it was kind of a massive kick for me, and I was so high that afternoon that I couldn't sleep in the evening. I had a very high pulse when I came home, because we were literally we played the beautiful game in almost 90 minutes, and I still remember some very old club people came to me and said that's the best they've ever seen on the 19s play. So that was the day where we were almost perfect. So that means more to me than mentioning whatever we won of titles that year or something else.
That's incredible. A friendly game in the middle of January. What would you have as the first line of your career obituary?
Can you specify that?
So if you were writing an autobiography, or if you were writing about your life, what would be the first line of that autobiography or that obituary?
Yeah, I think it's something we already been around that I would always, I think also actually in my bio I say something like that. I must have passion to fulfill whoever I work with or whoever I work for, because if I don't have passion, I won't last. I've tried it. I've been in a job interview once where the guy, the director wanted to hire me. He very proudly showed me all the bonuses I could get if I won that, and I could get a lot of money if I won that. And I literally felt pain in my stomach because I was sitting down thinking he has no clue who I am. He has no clue how I work and how I can succeed. So I basically walked away from the job interview, and the guy was very shocked because he thought that he was offering me a good deal. So I think something like that.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever received, and who gave you that advice?
No, there's no doubt that my mentor, who I mentioned before, his name is Flemming Petersen. He is now the technical director of FC Nordsjælland in Denmark, a very small but very, very interesting club in Denmark, with one of the best academies in the whole Europe, if you ask me. Flemming, I was lucky to meet Flemming when I was a young player. He was my coach, and that's why he inspired me a lot with his way of thinking. And I think he taught me that kind of if you make a difference for the club you work for, then eventually you will also make a difference for yourself. I mean, it's a little bit the other way around. Too many coaches I see also now. I get a lot of emails and requests and calls and messages from young coaches who want to go abroad, and that's very positive. But most of them have they start in the wrong content. They start to ask how much they can earn, for example, or they start to claim things that they are not in a position to claim. I think you must be more humble. You must start down the ladder. You cannot climb the first 6 steps before you climb the first 5, and that sometimes is a misunderstanding in football, that the people think they can basically jump. I call it to jump the fence. Players also sometimes have the same idea. They fail in the second tier, and then they think they can succeed in the first tier. It's actually the other way around.
Okay, so you can't skip steps. That's really good. Is there anything you would like to promote, or how can fans reach you?
I think promote for coaches, or if you talk in my own industry, I would really like to promote people to go abroad. It's something I speak about in Denmark also, that we must have more coaches go abroad. Not only to think that we're going to end up in Real Madrid or in Barcelona, that doesn't matter. But challenge yourself, see the world, get more perspective on your coaching, but in general also get more perspective on your life. And I also have a website where I like to write. Obviously, also because of my education, I like to write things, and sometimes I basically just write them for myself, and then I just publish it. To get more thoughts in my own mind, and then sometimes you can enter my website to find a few maybe inspirational things there.
Yeah, no, I found a lot of good, interesting stuff in some of your blog posts. No doubt, especially like the motivation and some of the stuff that we talked about in this podcast. You had online as well. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate talking to you.
No, it's been a pleasure. Very good questions as well.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to it on iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Acast, or any podcasting catching app. Want to learn more about the guests and go behind the scenes? Then go to my website, www.footbalautobiographishow.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. Also, if you like the show, or even if you hated it, leave a comment on either my Twitter page @FootballAutoBio or my Facebook page, The Football Autobiography Show. I welcome and would appreciate any feedback from you all. Thanks for listening. Take care.